joining. Let me get started. Thank you all for attending our soybean data webinar. These are data webinars we have after every data release. We have one for wheat, we have one for corn, we have one for soybeans. Obviously, we're talking about 2025 data. It's just happening in 2026 with all the holiday stuff and everything else. Here, I'm going to go through kind of what the season looked like in soybeans for the OVT. I'm going to talk about how different maturity groups performed across environments. And then we're going to dig down into kind of the details of A, where to find the OVT data if you haven't looked for OVT data in the past. And B, how can we look at the OVT data and find, multi-year data that good varieties through multi-year data and good varieties through single-year data. That's a lot of data because it's a soybean test. It's roughly 10,000 data points every single year. So we probably won't get to every single maturity group, region combination. It just will take too long. And I want to keep this kind of concise because I want to appreciate you all attending and I want to be cognizant of your time. But we'll try to get to the high flyers. I will say this is a very informal meeting. It's not a formal presentation on my part. So if you have questions throughout, I have chat open. Just shoot me a message in chat or raise your hand on the Zoom call. And I'll stop and we can kind of go through, because the more that this is kind of back and forth sharing, the better off it's going to be for sharing information. Before I want to get started, I wanted to recognize that it's not just me that does this work. We have a large team within our group that helps execute these tests every year. For our full-time staff, we each give them their own crop that they can focus on. And Eliza Hardy, who's on Zoom, Eliza, if you want to wave, is our primary lead for soybeans from the OVT group. So she was, if you're an agent, she was one that you were talking to. She was out scouting. She was out doing a lot of the boots on the ground work. So thanks to Eliza for that work. She'll be kind of being more integrated in this process moving forward. So instead of me giving a webinar next year, you might see her giving a webinar. But I want to recognize Eliza for her work and what she's done. So let's start with how the soybeans and OVT worked this year. And hopefully you're seeing a map of North Carolina with all of our soybean locations. Anything in blue is a full season location. Anything in green is a double crop. Anything in black is a full season and double crop location in the same field, which means it was just a delayed planting. It wasn't behind wheat. If it's a green X, it was behind wheat. The only difference here, and I didn't recognize this until I pulled the thing up, is that our Sampson County location, I know you're not seeing my pointer, but our Sampson County location should be a black X because that was both in the same field and it was a delayed planting. We intended to be behind wheat there, but we just weren't able to. The one that you're seeing with a red circle around it is our Granville double crop location. That one we lost due to deer pressure. We have a lot of deer pressure throughout the year. And really the story of the year was two stress events for our soybeans. Early on in May, a lot of water, a lot of rainfall, and I'll show you that kind of in detail here in a couple of slides. And then once we got into July and August, mostly in late August, a lot of dry weather. And so where we had too much rainfall, we were affected. Where we got too dry weather, we were affected. And so it was really a variable year for us overall for soybeans. What I like doing, if this thing will forward for me, is looking at and breaking down the yield levels by planting timing, and then we'll break that out into maturity groups, and we'll break that out further into different regions. So I'm showing up here, and hopefully you're seeing full season and double crop yields for statewide for this last year. And then I'm putting in parentheses what they were last year, so in 2024. And you'll notice that we dropped almost 13 bushels on full season average compared to last year. And we dropped 17 bushels on double crop average compared to last year. So overall, we're lower, significantly lower than we were yield wise, in 2024. A lot of that's because of that early wet pressure that we had and then that late dry pressure that we had. If we break that out into maturity group by full season, you can see that maturity group 4 was really our winner as far as yield level goes, followed by MG5, followed by MG6, followed by MG7, 8. This is a trend that we've seen in the past. This is one that Rachel's identified with her work. Really, those early maturity groups take advantage of that earlier planting timing. Now, obviously, I'm not planting in April. I'm planting in May. So it's a little bit delayed compared to what Rachel has seen with Group 3s and Group 4s. But for sure, this last year, Group 4s had the advantage where we were able to get through that early season rainfall. And I'll show you a location where we weren't. Group 4s really thrived. Now, if we had a lot of early season rainfall pressure, we didn't get a lot of height on those soybeans. Therefore, we did not get a lot of pod load. Therefore, something like a Group 5, Group 6 looked better. But if we looked statewide, Group 4s really had an advantage this last year. We can break that into region, and really the story is the same regardless of what region you're talking about. With the exception of Piedmont, it's a little bit tighter in Piedmont, where Group 5, Group 6s were close. But overall, Group 4s really kind of had the advantage this last year for planted full season. And that's a trend that we've seen in the past. If you look at regions overall, obviously Tidewater had a little bit higher yield potential compared to Piedmont, compared to Coastal Plain, but we're not talking about a large amount, 9 bushels. So you're not going to see a huge skew of variety performance based off of raw yield based off the region. But Tidewater did have an advantage this year overall. All right, so that's full season. Let's look at double crop. Double crop is a little bit tighter. And again, this kind of tracks with what Rachel saw in the past. Once we get past into that June planting timing, it really doesn't matter what maturity group you plant. I would argue that this MG4, MG5 yield level and MG6 for that matter are very close. You're within a bushel one way or another. So really there was not a statewide, there wasn't a difference depending on what maturity group you planted if you're double crop. Again, that kind of tracks where we look at the different regions. Piedmont being a little bit different, and I think a lot of that's that dry weather. Piedmont was exceptionally dry in this August timeframe. And I think that really hurt those Group 4, Group 5s planted double crops ability to really yield. And that's where you saw a little bit better yield potential, Group 6, 7, and 8. Tidewater and Coastal Plain, you had a little bit of advantage with those early maturities because they were able to mature. Didn't have as much of dry weather. They had some, but not as much as Piedmont, and had a little bit better yield potential. So that's the breakout. Same story that we've been talking about the last couple of years. If you're full season, really want to look at that Group 4, maybe early Group 5 maturity group. If you're double crop, you have opportunities across different maturity groups for planting a lot of different varieties because you don't see a yield drag based off the maturity group that you're planting. Now, we talked about the weather season. These are weather graphs that I actually post on the OVT website, and I'll show you where those are located here in a minute. But I wanted to kind of visualize what that weather pressure looked like this last year. So we're looking at Bertie full season weather here. Dates across the bottom, and then it's 2 different measurements. We have our high temperature, so that's that red squiggly line going left to right. The high temperature graph is on the left, so 45 degrees to 105. And then each of the black bars is a rainfall event. This is our Bertie County site where we weren't able to report our early 4, and I think we were able to report late 4, but definitely not our early Group 4 tests. And you can see why. Look at the number of black bars that we had from the time we planted all the way really until the middle of or end of June. Like a lot of 1-inch rainfall, 1 inch or close to 1 inch rainfall events. And you can see it in the plants. The plants were significantly shorter than the Group 5s, Group 6, and Group 7s of that site. And then you look and get into late August, early September, no rainfall there for almost a month. You go from August 20th through almost September 17th before you get a significant rainfall event. And even then, it's only 0.3. So we suffered kind of double hit this location, way too much water ahead of time. And then we got dry out here. And as Eliza can attest, once we got dry in this late August through early September timeframe, the top pods did not fill out. We had a lot of blank top pods, which means we limited our yield potential. And we saw that with that statewide yield level that we had. A different version of this, but very similar to it, is Union County. So again, a lot of rainfall early on, maybe not as much rainfall events in that May, June timeframe, but look at how much rainfall we got July through August. And then the spigot turned off from August 13th almost to September 22nd, or 26th, sorry. A month and a half, generally a month and a half of dry, hot weather. And that really dinged our ability, particularly on double crop beans. If you think about double crop beans being planted in this middle June timeframe, yes, it's supported by water, but now it's not filling out. Like it's flowered and it's trying to fill pods in this August to September timeframe, and it can't do it because it's way too dry. And that's why you saw that yield drag with Group 4s in that Piedmont location compared to Group 5 and Group 6. So that was the story of our year. We had a lot of rainfall early on, which as long as it wasn't excessive was good to get our crop started and going. But then we really hit that dry period in late August, early September that really affected our ability to fill out. And you saw that yield drag, 13 bushels on full season, almost 17 bushels on double crop across the board. I do this every year. I look at if we have differences based off of trait. The dotted line the red dotted line you're seeing is the average yield level for all traits combined. Obviously, we don't have any Liberty Link that are being tested currently. We have glyphosate tolerant Roundup Ready, Extend Flex STS, Enlist STS, conventional STS. The take home message I want you to get from this graph is outside of, and glyphosate tolerant, we're looking at maybe 1 or 2 varieties, so that skews that a little bit lower. There's really no difference in yield level based off the trait that you're picking. You can pick Enlist, you can pick Extend Flex, you can pick conventional. Now, obviously, there's fewer number in the conventional lines than there are in the others. Our highest entry levels are Extend Flex and Extend Flex STS, and Enlist STS. But you can pick conventional, you can pick conventional STSs. There's a lot of good variety opportunities there as well. So it really doesn't matter. You're really matching your trait selection based off of what your management style is at the grower level. And I like to show this as a reminder because this is our model for how we're making selections using OVT data. We're starting with that 3 and 2 year data because it's our best predictor. We have enough data in those situations that we can look regionally. We can look at Tidewater, we can look at Coastal Plain, we can look at Piedmont and say, hey, this variety should perform well in this environment because it's done well for multiple years. As a result, that should be the one we're planting on the most of our acres. Almost all of our acres should come from this 3 and 2 year OVT data. We can't stop there, particularly in a soybean land, because soybean varieties are changing every single year. So we need to start looking at newer varieties that are coming into the market, and that's where that single year statewide OVT data comes in. That gives you more choices, but you don't have enough data to say for sure and feel confident this can be a consistent performer for you. So what you need to do is limit the acres that you're planting that on, and you need to support that selection with your location data, with the industry data. So if you have a seed rep that talks to you, if you have neighbors that have planted that, agent strip trial data is another good source of data. I don't have agent soybean tests integrated into the variety selection tool yet. I do on corn. And so this is a good example for if we're doing corn selection. Obviously, we're not talking about corn, but if you're looking at a single year hybrid, you can look at that strip trial data in the same place and decide how that's going to work for you based off its performance. So this is a model I want us to think about when we start looking at this data here in a second. We want to start with 3 and 2 year data because that's our best predictor. It's our most consistent. We feel good about how it's going to perform for us. And then we need to look at single year options so that we're ready for that swap out. When that 3 and 2 year data variety goes away, do we have one ready to go that we can plant on a lot of our acreage? So that's kind of the background of the OVT and what we saw with soybeans so far. Before I go into data, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close this out and we're going to play how does Ryan swap to a different view. The good news is I'm on my own computer this time, unlike corn, so this should be a lot simpler than what it was. All right, screen one. There. Should be seeing a OVT website. It's not showing for me. Well, Liza, give me a thumbs up if we're seeing the OVT website. Okay, thank you. So 2 ways to get OVT data. The first is the OVT website, ncovt.com. When you go to that site, this is what you see. If we're looking for, all the different crops are listed here on the left-hand side, I want to look at soybeans. So I'm going to click on soybeans. All the years are then listed. I'm going to click on 2025. And then we have all of the reports, both data tables themselves. So if we scroll all the way down here, you'll see location summary tables in Excel for all the different maturity groups. And we split out early 5s and late 5s because you're looking at indeterminate beans versus determinate beans. So you can look at the raw data. You can download those Excel files if you just want to look at that and play with the data yourself. The other thing we have are PDF reports. So these multi-year data reports are all from the variety selection tool. They're just above average lines that performed well based off the whole data that exists in the database. And then we do those single year pulls from the variety selection tool for every single maturity group. And then we have all of the variety selection tool reports in Excel as well, so you can play with those instead of looking at a PDF, something a little bit more editable. Along with the data, we have the soil fertility and cultural practices for every location. We have the weather data, which is what I was showing you before for every location. Then we have the sponsors and cooperatives listed as well. I don't have the soil fertility and cultural practices or weather data in Excel, but you can always contact me if you want to get that so you can use it for presentations or something like that, or if you need to use it for another purpose. But this is a good starting point. Like, you're not used to using the variety selection tool, you can come here, you can click on, okay, I want to see multi-year, because Ryan said multiple year data is the best place to start. I want to look at multiple year for full season because that did well this last year. That's the image you're going to see. Just making sure that's actually showing to you. Yes. You're going to see the report that I pulled out. I'm going to try to zoom in on this. They'll let me. Okay. So if I'm looking at this table as a grower, I've got these pulled statewide above average, or I'm sorry, yeah, statewide above average, but I've also shown where they've done well by different environments. So this is percent of trial mean. This is asking because, raw yields can be skewed both by location. So different environments, like let's say we know that Tidewater yields higher in general year over year compared to other locations. If we make a raw yield selection from another region, it might skew to the Tidewater. Or years. If you think about the fact that we would drop 13 or 17 bushels on average from last year, any raw yield selections you're making are based off of last year's environment, not this year's environment. And so that percent of trial mean helps standardize those yield levels across different years and across different regions. And so all I'm asking here is, how much better was this variety compared to all the other varieties I planted in that test, right? If I just randomly selected a variety in that test, how much better is this high soy variety compared to a random selection out of that test? And in this case, it's almost 10% better. And you can think about that as in a yield perspective. So if I'm usually yielding 50 bushels, this is saying that this is going to be a 55 or almost a 55 bushel bean, right? It's 5 bushel better in that space. We're going to start assigning absolute values of yield to this because it's hard to convert a percentage to, okay, this is how much I can expect to return on picking this variety on this acre. So we're going to be doing that moving forward. But that's why we're looking at percent trial mean. We're standardizing that yield level, and we're asking how much better was this versus a random selection out of the test in that maturity group. Does that make sense? Anything for me above 3% is a good selection. Anything below 3%, you're really 2% on either side of zero. So you're -2 to +2. You're really kind of in the noise. You're very much on average. Anything 3 and above, you're getting out of that noise. You're starting to make some selections. So you can see here, high soy did well statewide, did well across all 3 regions, maybe a little bit better in Coastal Plain and Piedmont than in Tidewater. But something like Ag South Genetics, this 4921 conventional, did well statewide. It really had to fit in the Tidewater, but it still did above average on the Piedmont. So you can start making some very specific regional selections based off of this data. Okay. But this is a starting point. This is where we're going to start for making those selections. We're really looking for, let's say I'm a grower, I want a group 4 full season, multiple year. Here are some good options for us to choose from to go to our retailer, to go to our seed rep and say, hey, I want to try 1 or 2 or 3 of these. So that data exists on the OVT website, ncovt.com. You'll see that for double crop. You'll see that all across maturity groups. And again, statewide, where we do single year, I'll have the same thing. Again, I'm breaking it out by both statewide and by region. So you can see, in this case, we can't say, oh, I've got to select this just based on how it did in the Piedmont because it's single year data. Instead, we're looking at how it did statewide, and we're looking across to see if it performed well in our region as well as kind of a confirmation. Okay. So that's one source of data, is the OVT website. Any questions on that? All right. The one thing I'm going to focus on the most today is going to be the variety selection tool, because this is our combined database for all of our data across all different crops. I'm just checking real quick to make sure I'm sharing. It is. So this has, I want to say it has over 17,000 data points, well, almost 17,000 for soybeans, over 7,000 for corn, over 4,000 for wheat. This is going back to 2014 for wheat. This is going back to 2018 for corn and soybeans. The cool thing about this is that we can start looking at different relationships. We can look at really dive down into the details of different varieties. And not only that, but if there wasn't a variety that was tested this year, let's say it's an older variety and was tested prior to this year, you can make comparisons. You can start looking at how a variety did this year compared to an older variety last year. So gives you a lot of flexibility to try to find that variety that fits well for your operation. What I was showing before with the OVT website, that's a good starting point. You get good static data tables. If you just want a quick answer, that's a good place to go to. If you really want to dive into the details, get disease ratings, get fits by region, look at how it compared to older varieties, this is your place to go. Okay, this is really your option right here. So this is the landing spot for the variety selection tool. I've got the address up here, and I'll post it in the chat in case you don't have access to it. And I'm going to click soybeans because that's where we're going to start. When we're in soybeans, or when we're in any crop, really, I'm going to start with OVT data because this is going to give us a look like we were looking at those tables before from the variety selection tool. Okay, so I'm going to click OVT data. It's going to hopefully, please be working today. It's going to give me some options. It's going to preload. It's going to say, okay, do you want to look at specific group, maturity group, and planting time, or you want to do your own thing? I would suggest that you start with this preloaded one, because this is really going to kind of walk you through where you want to go. So I want maturity group to be, let's say we know group 4s did well this last year, full season, right? So I'm only going to focus on group 4, group 5s for this conversation. We can look at other maturity groups, let me know at the end. But we're going to start with group 4, group 5. I'm a grower. I want to look at a group 4 because I knew I did well last year. So my maturity group is going to be group 4. I can select 3. I can select as many as I want here. And then I know I'm looking full season of stuff. Okay, so I'm selecting those. I'm going to say get data. And this should filter it for me. And then it's going to give me a lot of different options here. I'm sorry, I have this changed because I was doing something different a while back. Okay. So now I've got all the varieties pulled out. This is everything that was tested last year. So everything that was tested in 2025. I'm going to get rid of this. You can click this you can click this little triple line here to get rid of this sidebar if you don't want it. And if you need more screen room, you can click the setup icon to get rid of the sidebar, and that gives you a whole lot more screen. These are all the varieties that were tested for me last year. So Coastal Plain, the 4 locations we had there, Piedmont, the 4 locations we had here, and this is full season, so we had 4 locations in Piedmont. The 2 locations in Tidewater that we had, and then averages those, and then it gives me the averages across regions, across years. So this is your multi-year data. So your 23 to 2025. So you got single year data from here all the way back with location data here, and then you got your multiple year data here. You got Ys and Ls and these multiple year locations. The Ys are number of years we tested it. The Ls are number of locations. Okay. So obviously a Y3, Y2 is going to be the higher number of years. That's your multi-year data you're looking for. I'm going to make a couple of different differences here. This is just showing me raw yield. I'm going to look at percent of trial mean, so I can make any selection I want over here. I want to look at percent of trial mean. I'm going to rebuild that. And then I'm going to do one additional filter because we're talking about multiple year data, right? So we don't necessarily want to look at 1 and 2 year data. We just want to focus on 2 and 3 year data in this space. So you can go to filters. So these are all the data fields you can select. You can go to filters, and we've already filtered by planting, timing, maturity group. I'm going to filter again by number of years. You can scroll down to find it, or you can type it in. So I'm going to just type in years. There's number of trial years, and I want that to be greater than 1 because I just want multi-year data in here. Okay, now we just have group 4 multiple year data, right? Or just full season. Because this is where I'm starting. I'm a grower. I want to look at full season beans. Ryan said full season group 4s were the best since last year. That's where I'm starting. Because these are all Y2, Y3s, I can now sort by region and look at those specific regions to decide what varieties I want to really focus on. So if I'm in the Tidewater, I'm going to click on Tidewater twice. This little arrow should be now pointing down because you're high to low just on Tidewater. Now this is raw yield. I apologize. I'm going to get off of raw yield. I'm going to go percent trial mean, because we're looking at multiple year data. And I'm gonna look at Tidewater, right? Here are all the varieties. Anything in blue is above average. You know, where here's our 3% and higher, but these are all the varieties I'll look at starting as a starting point if I'm in the Tidewater region and I want to look at a good, consistent multiple year variety. I can pull all these out, so I can click on these down to, I'm gonna go down to 3%. So there's going to be 9 total. I can compare those by clicking on this compare button. And now that gives me all the information for this, right? Now I've got all the information for these different varieties. I've got their characteristics. I've got their disease ratings where we were able to get to source them. I have all of their information, how they're, what population they're planted at, you know, their relative maturity, their top yield group percentage. So this is how many times they were in that top LSD. Per location across multiple years. So 85% is pretty good for considering that this was tested over 2 years. It's done pretty well. A lot of different information. This is somewhere, you know, those that have followed me through this process before, you've seen this, you understand how this works. For those that are new, this is really your holy grail of all the different data. You know, if you're curious about like, okay, that's fine, Ryan, but where did it really yield? You can actually click on this and it shows you, you know, the location, the yield level, and everything else. You can get the drill down details if you want. So if I'm a grower, I want to look at Group 4 full season. I'm in the Tidewater. This is where I'm going to look. The cool thing is you can then export this. You can download this if you want to into an Excel worksheet. What I like to do is I like linking this because then I can take this or send this to somebody and say, hey, do you have these varieties? These are ones I'm looking at. I put this link in chat so you can kind of pull it up yourselves and take a little bit closer look at it. This is MG4 full season, multiple year. You can do a lot of things here. You can make a lot of different selections based off of different characteristics it has its trait package as well, along with everything else. Any questions? So if I'm Tidewater, Group 4 full season, this is where I'm going to start. Okay. The story is the same across any region that we look at if we're looking at multiple year data, right? So I'm gonna leave this comparison window. I'm gonna go back to where we were before. I'm still in multiple year full season data, but the story is the same. Like, okay, I'm not in the Tidewater, I'm in the Piedmont. Notice before I sort the Piedmont high to low, how many commons do you have that are above average from the Tidewater multiple year Tidewater to Piedmont to coastal plain? It's not every single one, right? Like you've got some that did well in the Tidewater that didn't do as well in the Piedmont coastal plain. You have some in the did well in the Piedmont that didn't do as well in the coastal plain or Tidewater, and so on and so forth. Like you've got a high one down here, this Pioneer line, that's done really well in the coastal plain over 2 years, but it hasn't performed as well in the Piedmont and Tidewater. This is the power of this tool, is that we're able to hone in on those variety fits by region, particularly in multiple year. We can't sort in by region on single year, but we can sort by region on multiple year. And we can really find those varieties that did well that maybe we're not pulling out because if we look at the total, where's that Pioneer line? I mean, it's there, so it's still being pulled in by above average, but you're not pulling in this AGS line. Sorry, not AGS, ASGRO line. Yeah, ASGRO line did really well in the coastal plain. It's a group, now it's group 3, it's a 3.9, but it did well. It was just a little bit below average overall because it's competing against a lot of other group 4s. So this is your power, is you're able to find varieties that you wouldn't necessarily see because you're just looking at, you know, high to low, what worked well total, or your high to low, what worked well in the region. So same as the Tidewater. I'm going to do Piedmont. I'm going to do 3% and higher. Again, I'm just making these selections up here. Here we have 13 that are 3% or higher. Have I done that right? And then I will link this out to y'all, you to look at if you're in the Piedmont. And then I'll do the exact same exercise for coastline, just so that those in the coastline have that link as well. You can see there's a ton of data. Like I could spend a half a day going through every single data look, right? The goal here is twofold. I want you to know where the data is, how to access the data, and then I want you to be able to make those sorts and selections on your own. Know how to make those sorts and selections, know what to look for, where to look for it. So we're going to do this multiple year exercise. We won't do it for double crop and for all the others. I'll show you how to get to that. But I want to do the multiple year data exercise first, and I want to do the single year data so we can show you how I'm looking at that. So I'm going to pull in this coastal plain multiple year full season group 4 data. Compare that, and then I'll pull that out to y'all. Okay. I didn't title it, but that first one that I put in chat was Tidewater. Sorry about that. Okay, so we can do the very similar thing, whether it's group 5, group 6, group 7, or 8, if we're looking at multiple year data. I will show you that, okay, we're looking at full season for this. If I want to swap and look to double crop, I've just got to change this filter from full season to double crop and then hit filter. And now that changes everything to just looking at double crop planting on multiple year. Okay. Very quick and easy, quick and dirty way of getting to that data. So that's multiple year data. Now I want to show you how I would go about looking at single year data so we can look at those newer varieties that are just in the market or just coming onto the marketplace. So I'm going to go back to full season. We know group 4s did well full season, so we're going to stay there for a hot minute. I'm going to take away this trial years. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change trial years equal to 1. We've already pulled out the 2 and 3 year data, right? Does that make sense? We've already identified the varieties are 2 and 3 year. We don't need to look at them again. We know what they look like. We know how they performed. So now, instead of saying I want anything that's above 1 year, I'm telling it I want anything that's equal to 1 year. Okay, that just was in the test for 1 year. And that should give me all my Y1s. So there's all my Y1s here. Now it's kicked me back to raw yield. I'm gonna be persnickety and go back to percent trial mean. Here, because we're looking at single year data, it doesn't matter whether we're looking at this 23, 25 average or the 25 average, it's the same data. But we can't look by region. We can't make selections just based off how it did in the region because it's just single year data. It maybe just hit a hot spot that year and did fine. What we want to do instead is look total. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at this 2025. This is our statewide for just 2025, and I'm going to sort it high to low just based off of that. And then I'm going to make selections based off my region here, right? If I'm in the coastal plain, this NK line did really well overall. It's highest overall by percent of trial mean in the test, group 4 full season, single year data. If I look across, I feel good about using it in the coastal plain. I feel good about using it in the Piedmont and the Tidewater. It was closer to average. It's not bad. It's still above average. But you've really got some good fits based off of single year data in the coastal plain Piedmont. I'm going to do the exact same exercise as I go down. How does this high soil line do? How did this Asgrow line do? The Asgrow line is a good example of how we flipped a little bit. It's doing really well, did really well in the Tidewater, did highest, this teal color is highest, did the best in the Piedmont and was a little bit lower on the coastal plain. So if I'm the Piedmont, I feel good about trying this variety out because, hey, it did well this last year. I'm, again, not going to put on a lot of acreage, but I'm at least going to give it a try. So this is how I would look at single year data is I'm sorting this high to low just based off 2025 statewide data. And then I'm looking across my different regions to get confirmation that it's going to work for me. Okay. I will go ahead and pull in, I'm just going to pull in 3% higher on single year group 4 full season. It won't be, obviously it's not region specific, so it's going to be for everything, but at least you'll have a link to that and that gets you started if you're wanting to look at group 4 single year full season. Okay. Given that, I do want to point out one more thing, and that is if you're in this compare window, and this is just kind of we talk about trying to use this system on the phone. Obviously, this is a lot of data to try to scroll through on a phone. What I really like this database for on the phone is if I want to look up data on a single variety. Let's say a seed rep has come to me and they said, "Hey, you've got to try this thing." I can go on my phone and look really quickly to see if OVT has tested this variety of how it's done, how it's done for them. The way I would do this is that you go to the same dashboard, but where it has this little search icon, kind of like what you put in for Google, I can type in the variety name. So in this case, I'm going to pick a Asgrow line, AG39 FX3. Let's say Asgrow came to me, they said, you need to try this 39 XF3. I can type in just a part of that and it'll tell me whether it's in the database or not. Here it is. I can click on it. I can get all the information that we have for that variety. And then when I click on data, I can see how it performed. Like, this is a very phone-friendly option then. If you want a quick and dirty look and see how a variety performs. Like, you're being asked about a variety, or you find a variety online, or you talk to your neighbor about what variety they're growing, you can pull this up on your phone, type in that variety name really quickly, and it pulls, you can pull it to data from the OVT. In this case, and we saw this before, it does well on the coastal plain. That's a really good coastal plain fit for this Asgrow variety. Now, obviously, this is both double crop full season, so double crop group threes are something I wouldn't necessarily recommend. If you dive deeper in this, obviously you saw better performance across the full season. All right, anybody have any questions? That's kind of where I wanted to be. If you have different maturity group, planting timings, regions that you want me to deep dive into, I'm happy to do that. It'll get very, very old listening to me go, here's group 5 full season, here's group 5 double crop for the next 30 minutes. So if there's some specific looks you want me to do, I can definitely do them while we're here. Or if you have any general questions about kind of the data or the way it's structured in the database. I've either put everybody to sleep or they're completely cool with how everything works, or they're just so mind flooded they're like, yeah, sure, Ryan, data. I will say you don't have to do this if you're a grower. You don't have to do this on your own. Yeah, our extension agents are an awesome resource. They've had experience with this. We've done agent training. We'll continue to do agent training on this database tool, so they can help you identify varieties based off the data inside of here. If you don't have contact with your agent, or if you want, if you're just trying to do it on your own and you have some questions, you're more than welcome to call, text, email me. I'm going to put my phone number and my email address in chat, so you can, if you have questions as you're kind of messing around with the database, you're more than welcome to call or contact me, and I can get you a quick selection out of this information if that's what you're looking for. Does it make sense, Mac?
Oh yeah, sounds good.
I was making sure somebody was listening because I could have been muted this whole time. It kind of feels like. Before I go, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I do appreciate you taking time to come here today and listen to this. Again, we do this every single time we release data, so tell your friends, tell your family. Happy to walk through that data every single release that we have. So thank you.